All right, just putting in a couple more folks. All right, so if everyone could mute your microphones, um, I'll make sure I'm not muted here, and Larry is not muted. Larry, welcome. Larry Nemechek, Dr. Trek himself. I'm so excited to have you here to kick off the first of our Soul Speaker Series. I want to say thank you also to everyone who has been patient since we had a little confusion about time zone, which I did not catch. And we learn every time we do something new, and this is new for us. So, um, Larry, I went through and read a bit about you online today, and
Uh-oh.
it would could take me 20 minutes to go over
Uh-oh.
all the amazing things that you are doing and have done. But Larry is an author, an interviewer, a host. uh, My notes say anarchist, but I think it really means archivist,
Sometimes I've
producer,
been anarchist, but yeah.
producer, voiceover actor, and super fan of Star Trek. Um, he's the author of the best-selling classic Star Trek: The Next Generation Companion, and since 1992 hosts the weekly podcast Trek Files for Roddenberry Podcasts, among many other things. I'm really happy that he is here today. And if you have questions, please type them in the chat box, or you can raise your hand if it's a really important question that might need some more elaboration, and we will get to you.
Right.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Larry, and say welcome very much to Starfleet International and to our Sol Speaker Series.
Well, thank you very much. I know I've been an honorary member of a lot of chapters, and I go way back to I played a peace role back. I'm a native Okie. I know we've got some in the old ancient days. There was a time when Starfleet chapters, at least in Oklahoma, were like some denominations of churches where the minute you get 8 people in the congregation, four and four of them divide over something, and the 4 run off and start their own church. And that was happening with some Starfleet chapters back in the day. I'm talking like the 80s and 90s. But anyway, we started a convention in Oklahoma City and needed everybody's help and volunteerism. So um, we played peacemaker and and everybody wound up working together and getting along. But more than that, over the years just saw people, the chapters that have come and gone, and the people, and even my wife Janet, who worked on Voyager for 5 years as the assistant script coordinator. She started a little, in the SAA, they're called incipient shires. They're little baby, organizations. So she had a shuttle even, but it was the most low-key, laid back. She says, I just want to get together and watch the shows. So I've seen that all the way up to, knowing Eric Stillwell and knowing that he was a former president before he worked for Harv Bennett and then worked for Michael Piller at Star Trek. Anyway, all that to say is it's always kind of an honor and a thrill to do anything that Starfleet is still around and going strong, and that you're starting this program. So I'm kind of thrilled and tickled to be your first guest. So
Awesome.
yeah. So yeah. So everybody, I'll try to keep an eye on the questions, but she's gonna ping me if something is going on. Barb's agreed to do that. But let me just plunge in here, because the topic here is about Star Trek and star charting and the real world of astronomy and physics and the galaxy and Star Trek's side. And the thing I will always say about Star Trek is I will never say anything about what everybody's got their own passions. And I don't care if it's quilting or stamp collecting or whatever, or Star Trek. And within Star Trek, there's all the niches of what everybody enjoys the most. And for me, when I was a kid in junior high, and a lot of you will go back with me. I'm going to be curious to see how many we have in the audience today that are watching this later, that go back with me. I go back to Star Trek was just starting to bubble up, the reruns after school, and you could count on one hand the actual books you could get. The Making of Star Trek, the classic book, and all that, and then Franz Joseph's original tech manual and all of that. But back in those days, there was only, there was no bloody A, B, C, or D. It was just the original cast and the shows. And it's hard for the kids today watching, or anybody of any age, just watching Star Trek now, to remember what it was like, that it was just such a gobsmacking thing. Nothing else existed that it was, now we say, oh, it was world building and it was, you know, all the buzzwords we use now. But that's what was amazing to me. And the thing that attracted me to Star Trek in the beginning was, you know, you love the characters and obviously, and they're charismatic and the chemistry and all that. And of course, the stories and all the things we say about Star Trek. But the thing that really grabbed me was after I realized, after watching for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, it was like, oh my God, it's like, I remember they mentioned that before. Or, oh, look, that's, you know, I got into a debate with some of my friends at school. And then when the tech manual came out, and I was able to walk in and say, see, I told you, the patches do match the uniform color. You know, like they had that organized. It was just kept being amazing to me that they organized this. And as much as we like to point out, you know, the nitpicks and things then and now, it's just amazing that they did that. And then the minute you start reading the making of Star Trek, you would see here's the, you know, the Dorothy Fontana and the Bob Justman memos back and forth, and the science advisors that they had. And I just took that. I was like, oh, well, yeah, sure, of course. And what really brought it home to me was the first time I got a copy of Bijo Trimble's Concordance, on top of everything else, to see everything organized, right? And to see everything like an encyclopedia. And one of the things that hit me right off, aside from how complete it was I thought, my God, these stars, these planets, they're just so disorganized. Somebody needs to organize this. And I'm not an astronomer or a physicist or anything like that by any means. So, you know, I'm not an astronomer, and I don't even play one on TV. But I was back, you know, you'd get the constellation. I don't know if anybody else did that too. We'd get the like the glow in the dark map and go out in the night sky and do constellation, just star watching, just simple stuff. And, you know, you go to your planetarium and they do kind of the same thing. And I would do that. And I was far enough along to know that when Star Trek would mention Alpha Centauri or Rigel or Capella, you know, that those were real stars. And it struck me looking at Bijo's Concordance, one of the first things that hit me was how Star Trek had real stars mixed in with all the fictional ones, right? The obvious names they made up. Whether they were something trying to sound like Alpha something, or, you know, Fred's Planet or whatever it was. So anyway, one of the first things that got me going when the medical reference came out 2 years later, it was like Christmas. Ballantine publishers had, you know, after the blueprint sold so big and the tech manual sold so big, and we're talking like the mid-late 70s, they had to have something every year. After the tech manual was such a big hit, so they brought out Bijo's Concordance in a professional edition. That was a huge, you know, with the wheel on the front. That was huge. And then the next year, they brought out the Starfleet Technical the medical reference. And that's what really started, because I had started paying attention to the stars and I saw what they did, and I tracked down, like years later or very soon after, I found out that that part of it was about Jeff Mandel's project. And that's a name that you'll know and should know and is out there and keeps circling around Star Trek on the art side of things. Brilliant graphic artist, brilliant blueprinter. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. But I basically wrote a letter to say how some of the stars that they had matched up as the homeworlds wouldn't really work, because the star they had for the Klingons was way closer than the star they had for Andorians. And that doesn't make any sense. You know, the Klingons wouldn't be closer than the... Anyway, and I got a letter back from Jeff and saying... you know, thank you. I've gotten millions of letters like yours, but you're the only one that wasn't screaming at me that I was a moron. Like, you had the nice letter. So let me go ahead and start. You're tired of staring at me. Let me get into this. And I have to expand my box out as much as I zoom. There we go. So I think everybody can see, right? Are we coming? Oh no, let me finish. Boom, there we go. So what you're looking at here is the big map, what I call map 10, or the National Geographic map, the kitchen sink map. That's the last of the set that we have in, I've got stellar cartography back here. Oh, you can't see it. My stellar cartography set, which is the mapping system that I inherited through a couple of false starts, and then Mike Okuda's basic sketch of the quadrants, and then Jeff Jeff filling it in about the time he worked on Enterprise. Well, the last of Voyager, and then into Enterprise, and then I was assisting, and then basically got handed this format of the mapping system, which is the 10 big giant fold-out maps that are also historic at times, and then the guidebook that goes with it in the big box. And this is the all together. A lot of this is Jeff's actual graphics, but this is just don't try to read any of this. It's just there. But and again, this is a movie, and then you've got the quadrants over here, the quarter. So here's me. If you don't know me, I've been a fan for a long time. Whoops, this is what I mean. Here, I'm gonna have to click each one. So Trekland Treks is our location tours I do here around LA. Portal 47 is my backstage monthly subscriber business. Those are actual businesses. The Trek Files is my podcast that Eugene Roddenberry now asked me to do with his dad's papers that weren't out in libraries. And Trekland Tuesdays Live is my Tuesday live show that you can jump in on at 1 Pacific or 4 Eastern, and 9 in Europe, 9 and 10. And Second Opinion is when there's new Trek out. It's my little 15-20 minute reaction show to the episode that comes out by Friday. It's not a fast take or a hot take. It's a second opinion from Dr. Trek. Haha. So that's kind of my media empire and what's going on here. And the reason this is such an awesome picture. Again, props to Jeff for doing the actual graphics here. But that's all that I'm doing now. But what's crazy is I started to say, going back to, if you go back in fandom with me, or if you've picked it up, here's your original Starfleet technical manual. So we've got so much in Star Trek. There's been so much written, so many aspects, the ships, and of course the characters, and people, academics obviously talk about the psychology and the social meanings, and just the metaphorical stories that we all love, and then all the making of every series when it's in its period. But what's amazing to me, and people forget this now, if you're going to go down the weeds here, if you're going to go down the path of Star Trek star charts, and especially the overlap with real science, people remember, what do you remember the tech manual for? Like the patterns for uniforms and the ships and all of Franz Joseph's wacky, took the Constellation class and made the Dreadnought and the Scout, the one pylon and all that. There's all of that there, and the basic props, and people were thrilled with that. And even he took the UN charter and changed, United Nations to United Federation of Planets, and gave us a charter for the UFP. All of that. And a lot of times people forget that he also, this engineering guy, delved into a little bit of astronomy and science and put out the first the first attempt by anybody to try to chart Star Trek. Now, I think most of us know we live in the Milky Way galaxy. The Milky Way, it has its name from the way we're looking at Earth and look up, and the thick part of the rim that we're like, if we're in the middle of the plate and we're looking out toward the rim of the plate, well, that's where it's going to be the thickest. And that's what we see as the Milky Way. And it looked milky in the sky. And we just still use that, even though that has no reference to, our big spiral galaxy. But most of the time we can figure that out. And what's handy when I talk about it is sometimes it's good to talk about the Milky Way as a plate with maybe a little bulge in the middle. And sometimes it's handy to think about the Milky Way as a clock face where, 12, 3, 6, and 9 go around. And this is just the way that, just to get everyone on board here, this is kind of what Franz Joseph started doing, and everybody else has kind of gone with it. That's one thing he did do, was when you look at a quote unquote map of the galaxy, right? And of course, we're talking about 3D space, not 2D, but it's so thin, it's 100,000 light years across-ish, and then only about 10,000 thick. So, and that's, that's not solid. There's space in between stars, there's densities and all that. But basically, if you think about it as a plate, or as a clock, plate that you're looking down on, or a clock face that you're looking at from the front that's vertical. So here's Franz Joseph basically putting the real, as it was known in 1974, here's the galaxy, and we know where Sol is. We know where our system is, or Sol, and that's a home world to the Federation, however you draw it. And he basically said, okay, now he's throwing his own names here and doing all kinds of things, but he's out right off the bat, mixing in real science, and he's following up what, Gene did back at the beginning when, you've got the future projected science, right? And like, let's not do anything stupid. Let's at least have it be logical. You know, Harvey Lynn from the Rand Corporation right off the bat said, I wouldn't call your weapons lasers because in 200 or 300 years, you've probably got something else, come up with something. And maser was the new thing, but maybe you want something different. And phaser was like a laser, only multiple laser beams that can be phased. So you get the settings. So that's the thing that always got me, that you know, and many times the science advisor gives a memo in any era of Star Trek and the writers go, well, sorry, but we have to bend that, right? And it's gotten, and currently now with, I mean, Andre Bermanis for years and years, you know, and even Narain Shankar before him would be forced into bending science. They needed something and they would try to put something together, but they kind of gritted their teeth. And Dr. Aaron now, there's a lot of amazing things they can do to be true to the science. But the point is that Star Trek, unlike anybody else, any other the lovely franchises that are aspirational and, you know, respectful and cool and geeky, and all Star Wars on down, Doctor Who, everything. Star Trek is the one that's made the biggest effort to overlap, not just with astronomy, you know, like medical science and physics and material science and all of that, and at least be logical that way as much as they could be. And that's why we're like able to have a, you know, I could still give you a history of how Star Trek charted, but it's amazing to see how it's overlapping. And one of the other reasons why we have so many school teachers, public school teachers, professors who use Star Trek in the classroom, in the sciences, and then, you know, even in the social sciences too. So here's Franz Joseph out of the blue, picking up Gene's original DNA of the show that everybody since then, more or less, there's been a couple of times people strayed a little bit, but and kind of get and putting it right there, the scale and everything. So I'm going to pick this up a little bit. So, but notice the big thing though is here's the galaxy, and you just think, oh, Star Trek, they're flying all over the galaxy, it must be big. Well, this is a big chunk. We know where we are, and here's the center of the, you know, and now we've known that the Milky Way is a barred spiral. Back in the 70s, it's only been about 20 years that they realized we were a barred, because it's hard to look inside your house when we look at external objects, it's easier to see them than it is to be right here in the middle of it and trying to look toward the outside. So we now know that we're a barred spiral, but this was like a pure spiral coming out. But even so, they're trying to adhere to that. And again, you're already getting remember this, he's using degrees on a wheel, which that's one thing that people have tried to figure out, the mark system and navigation, and he had a theory. That all aside, realize we're looking down at the top. You know, if we're hovering above, looking down, either looking at our plate on the table, or we're standing here looking at it from this side, and that it's obviously not north, south, east, west. But if I start talking north, south, east, west, I'm talking about if Earth and the solar system are in this end, usually it's drawn with us in the south. So just keep that in mind, okay? Because the labels are going to change a little bit, as well as the scale, and you'll see what I mean. So here's my copy. This is how worn out my copy of Pijo's Concordance. And this is the way it's looked for. It got to this shape within the first 20 years, big time, because I was always referring to it and making notes and things. So just so you know, and we may have somebody who's got that too. And Barb, you know what? I'm going to ask you to jump in because I just realized, I guess I could pull them. I've covered the chats question. I guess I can do that. But ping me verbally, because I'm going to get all into this and I won't be paying attention. So if somebody's got
Yeah, we do have some questions actually.
Okay.
Fleet Captain Randy Mitson asked about the Federation being a centric circle with the Klingon and Romulan territories that are shaped to fit around it. And he wanted to know if there's a story behind that, like how once upon a time everything used to circle the Earth. And then another person wanted to know basically what's a barred spiral? How is it different from a true spiral?
Oh, okay. Let me get this. Hello, computer. There we go. I'm just trying to get us back to here. No, okay. Well, yes, you did notice that. The reason I didn't dwell on that until I got to the next one, because this was Franz Joseph's take. You're talking about why is it a perfect circle and the Klingons and Romulans are right up against it. How fortunate. What a great circumstance. Well, part of that is because the way he conceived the Federation, and it's even in the remember he has a copy of the Organian Peace Treaty, and he has a copy of the Neutral Zone Treaty to end the Romulan War, and he talks about he's using parsecs instead of light years, but he basically says that by treaty the Federation has an exploration zone, like the home worlds are a core inside, but this is all of our zone to explore, and it's a big, huge hunkin' piece of space here. And then so the borders there are just by war, by whatever, the Organians on the Klingon side. And so this is supposed to be, in his version, this is supposed to be the neutral zone here with the Romulans. And this is supposed to, sorry, that's going to pop up every time I do this. And that's supposed to be the Klingon neutral zone, which a whole sidebar here is the fact that I didn't want there to be, I thought we just had a rough border. And I hate the Kobayashi Maru because they started talking about the neutral zone and there's Klingons. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's no neutral zone on the Klingon side. But that ship sailed a long time ago. The Organian zone that Franz Joseph came up with talks about a border and all that. But finally, to answer your question, this is the first version, and this is not what, I'm going to get to this, but this is not what we wound up sticking with. So bear with me. It is wonderfully geometric and how nicely it all fits together in his version, which we very quickly got away from. I'll tell you. And remember, this is in the 70s and the 80s, and there is no Trek being aired weekly, so no one is coming out with new canon points, and it's the 70s, and you've got to really, 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 really be out there on the fringe, and there are a few of us, for this to sink into the people just trying to crank out, not a TV show at the time, but even doing the movies. And that's why, even if you think about the original series movies, there wasn't a lot of, you got the little voiceover about the Kobayashi Maru, which is just a simulation, remember. But other than that, there's not a lot of anything that's like grounded as far as how the galaxy is laid out and all of that. So just keep that in mind. And then the other question was what?
They were talking about barred galaxies. Someone said they didn't
Oh,
know the difference.
I'm not, basically it's visually, and I'll get into this a little bit, but basically this is like a core central with the spirals just flinging out of it like you'd think of a pinwheel, right? When you start the motion, it just flings out. And I'm sorry, I'm going to undo this just for a second. You think about it being a core, and then as it starts to spin, it's flinging out. And a barred spiral is actually, however, gravimetrically, if you look at a picture, instead of just being like a circle in the middle, it's actually kind of a bar, almost like a tie tack or something. And then the spirals come out from the ends of that. And we can see them around. People are classifying galaxies by their structure, and there are some that aren't spiral at all. They're just a glob of stars. And but it's a science that's very much ongoing, and it's a science that with the Hubble and now the new James Webb, that the observational and what they can do scientifically and the spectrum colors and all of that, remote sensing that we can do. Because we can't, we don't have an Idris 1 probe to send to the other end of the galaxy. But all of that, they're constantly adding to it. And about I was trying to pin down when this happened and I couldn't get it. But sometime in the early aughts, they had somewhere they came along with the proof that we weren't just a simple spiral galaxy. We had a bar in the middle, and then the spirals came out from that. Which is funny because now you watch Star Trek and you're watching Voyager, you'll see. It's like, well, what did we go back and undo that theory? But anyway, that's a small thing. Yeah. Let me get back. Okay. So this was but people forget that Franz Joseph in the tech manual, he made a stab at that. And I remember it because, again, my first passion, I didn't sit down and write Spock stories. I have an AMT model. I built the little exploration kit. I had a phaser and tricorder. But my thing was like, and this, if your head explodes there, this is, oh, come on. Really? This is, there we go. This is me trying to list all the stars using Bijo's book, all the stars, and then if it's marked it orange here, it's an actual star.
Larry, we don't see your screen.
I'm not sharing. You're just watching me wave.
Yes.
That wasn't, I see when I shrink the window. Zoom needs to redo this so that the chat and the record and the share screen are the first buttons that pop up. I hate, it's like, okay, there we go. Boom, boom. Okay, now. So basically, and I'm going to pick this up, but I just wanted to show you when I was a kid and had notebook paper, before computers. Anyway, I listed alphabetically all, which is easy to do because she had them alphabetically, but I listed all the stars and, planets, and then went back through it to figure out what were the actual stars that actually existed. And that's what I've marked here with orange, because if it was an actual star, then we knew like how far away it was and what its location was. Because I was going to sit down and make sense. I was going to make sense of all this mess. I was going to get those stars organized because we just didn't need them floating around out there, because it's a two-tier thing. One is the actual astronomy as much as it holds up and holds out. And then two, whether you've got fictional stars and planets or you've got stars that are really a big story point, you wonder if that really would work. First of all, just how far apart are these stars that it makes sense if there's an episode where they go from A to B and they're known stars, is that something that fits in the scale of what a warp drive can do? Which is a whole other, all the tech heads and you ship nerds know all this too, is getting the warp factors and all that and the different ways it's measured. So some of this was just to start to get a handle over it. And it's my handwriting and I'm not trying to make your, and then also just get a handle on just learning some basic astronomy in that, if this is our sun Sol, and that it's not a pretty thing. It's not an exact thing at all. It's stars that are clumped in basically that plate. That plate is not a wonderful piece of china. It's kind of a generic thing that once you back way away, you see it kind of looks like a disc. And of course, it's not a solid plate. It'd be like if your plate was like a lattice crust or something, only in spirals. And then the fact that our solar system is tilted to the galactic plane. And that's why we have the ecliptic and the zodiac signs and everything. We have our patterns of stars, the way we see them from our world. And then we also see how the sun goes in and out of them. The zodiac is just the constellations that the sun travels through during the year, according to our point of view. And that's an important thing here. Going from Earth-based astronomy and constellations and all the way we think about it, just because we're on Earth, versus what happens to another planet, much less if you're on an actual starship bopping around between stars. The way things looked on Earth doesn't do diddly for you when you're on Vulcan or when you're out somewhere 3 or 4, sectors away. No one cares what they look like on Earth. Now, if you're the dominant culture in the Federation and you started off a naming system that uses your constellations or your ancient Arab names that everybody agrees to keep using, like Rigel and Capella, which is why we have some stars that have like a proper name and some that have that alpha, beta, gamma, the Greek letter. That's a German. Let me see what's next here. But this is a thing to realize that we're tilted to the plane of the ecliptic. And just to go along with this is me. When I did that Franz Joseph map had a few things located. He had Rigel and he had Altair and Deneb. This is me taking Franz Joseph's system, and this is his map here, only I flipped it. So now the UFP is this way. And here's the Romulans and Klingons to the side. Only I put some color to it. And these bits with lines are supposed to be the space between the void spaces between the spiral arms, the way he drew it. I'm totally using his chart here. And this is me blowing it up and going through and putting every star from the original series, because I did this in the late 70s. This is the backside of a calendar from my dad's office. This is about like a 3x4 big wall hanging, and it's been banged up over the years, but I still have it. But this is where the telescoping thing of here's the close stars, here's Sol and 40 Eridani for Vulcan and all of that, and our close-in stars, and then this fits within, this box here fits within here, and then this one fits in here. So the local here, the dense stars are the ones that they use on the show, are the ones that sound familiar to layman ears, are here. And then sometimes you get a real star this far away. And here's the scale I'm using, think I'm still using parsecs because that's what he did. And this is a place where you could put all the fictional stuff, especially if you're supposed to be bopping on the neutral zone, and or you're over, K7 is supposed to be over here, and he had that. So this is me taking his and trying to flesh it out for the entire original series. And from there, I fleshed out an awful lot of, well, here we go. So this is close-ups of all of that. This is me using his basic thing. This is me trying to identify, planetoid cluster nebulova. A lot of that's just from, but this is the mid-range one. And then this is my updated list that wasn't quite so crazy. But the red marks there are all the real world, stellar classifications. Like our star, our Sol, is a G2 star. And there's a range of classifications. I used to know the mnemonic. It's Oh, be a fine girl, kiss me right now, Susie. And if you go through that, the O, be a fine girl right now, the F, G, R, and wait, no, F, G, K, and M. Scientists, the way they're defined, and the color, how hot they burn, what they're made of, and how old or young they are. And that's where you get to supergiants and giants and dwarf stars and that whole age range, the spectrum of life for a star. It's the F, G, K, M stars that are the ones that are able to have class of what we would think of as Earth-like planets. So our star is a G2. There you go. So if you're throwing out stars that are like way out of that range, like Altair 7, right, in Amok Time, well, it's an A7. It really shouldn't have class M planets around it. But there you go. But we know Altair, and they couldn't resist using common stars. But Harvey Lynn was always on to Gene saying, let's not just make up a star rather than use a real star that we already know. And we're talking like 60s, 70s level science. So anyway, this is my cleaned up thing. And then if you see there's nothing there, that's a made up star that doesn't have a set distance that, has to be pegged. So this is me being goofy, spending hours and hours and hours, not only figuring this out, but I wrote to a couple of planetariums that I didn't have, that didn't have real stars that were more obscure. And our local planetarium said, write the Harvard Observatory. So 18-year-old me got a letter from a grad student at the Harvard Observatory handwriting in a lot of these because I couldn't find them in the books in my life. This is pre-internet, right? So the big thing that happened was I spent hours and hours and hours working on this and working. And then I wrote a letter to Jeff Mendel on the medical reference. And I'm going to stop here. Wrote him a letter. We started working and in the late 70s, and he was in grad school and I was in college. And long distance phoning was too expensive. So we were writing letters and we're going through all this stuff. And he wanted to take all of my stuff and put it in his officer's manual, which a lot of you may remember had the red binding. All the things that weren't answered in the original series, like how does the saucer land, and just tons of things, and extra pages for tech manual and the medical reference and all that. And he wanted to have my star charts and the tables in that. And lo and behold, it was going to be awesome. I was going to be a published author and, people would know me and it was awesome. And I was going to share this. And then one day when I was in school, I got a letter that said, oh, well, Larry, I have some news. It's a whole new ball game. This thing is now professionally printed by Ballantine. It's licensed. It's a whole new way to look at the way the Federation, everything works in the real world, in the real galaxy. It makes a lot more sense because Franz Joseph's was way too big a scale for warp drive to work. So I don't know if any of you have ever seen this. It was a booklet, and it was two big fold-out maps like this that had two sides. And of course, I was crushed because everything I'd worked on was not going to work now. But again, as Jeff got into it, there was a big emphasis on overlapping real science, and so this is, again, we all know where the real world Earth and the solar system is within the galaxy. And that's what's happening here. And he's using real world, he's saying Federation space. So here we knew that this is about where, solar system is. And he's talking about the arms of the galaxy and all this. But again, it's using real science. Jeff inherited this project from a guy named Mike McMaster, who did the original Klingon D7 blueprints and the original bridge console button blueprints that was amazing back in the day. And then he died in a car wreck suddenly. And Jeff inherited this project. And if any of you have a copy of this, for a while, this was like hugely collectible because this was the last thing before Pocketbooks got the contract for licensed work, fiction and nonfiction with the motion picture, and they consolidated everything. And so they printed it, but they never made more. And if you really loved it, you couldn't get more past the original printing. Anyway, that's what we had. And this, it's funny because every iteration of gaming that needs details, you can tell what era the game was evolving and published by what star chart system they use. Because gamers, if they're doing ship to ship, a lot in the big picture, they need that. So the old original Starfleet battles used Franz Joseph's. FASA from the 80s, FASA, they used this book because it was the closest thing to having detailed, whatever that you could use. So everything is set up to use their, that keeps sketching. So bear with me. Then what happens? A, we actually get back into weekly TV with Next Generation. B, you've got super secret Uber fan Mike Okuda in there, who's doing way more than his pay grade says, and he's doing way more than he's getting paid to do. Everything from keeping the rooms of the Enterprise straight with a deck system, and Rick Sternbach is his able accomplice, to, here, back up a minute. I just want to say something. We do not know how amazing it is to have Mike Okuda where he was, and Rick Sternbach. Everything from the ships and the classes of ships and keeping all that straight, and the registry number system and the things that the ship nerds love, to bringing in real world, well, not so much star charts and all that, but just a sense of that. And just keeping up with the systems of the ship and the systems of the Federation, and just keeping where you didn't wake up every week with a new episode and everything was just, he was keeping track of things and keeping up databases and, and putting some, when they needed a new ship for a new episode, what would it be? And let's have a numbering, all of that. And lo and behold, nothing had come along in the way of star charting, although there were a couple of famous things. But basically, third season, Next Gen, the episode The Price, remember the Barzan wormhole? And the Ferengis are in one pod and Data and Jordan in the other. They had to convey, without bogging everybody down in how many 100,000 light years, and everybody, their eyes cross. They were looking for a way to signify that if this wormhole opened and it was first of all, how cool it was that you went through this wormhole. And remember, this is before Bajor. This is before DS9. And the only thing people knew of a wormhole was the wormhole on motion picture, which wasn't entirely accurate, but there you go. They needed a quick way for people to get it, that if you went in this wormhole, it was cool because you were you're across the galaxy. And if it was unstable and you got trapped on the other side, you ain't getting home. Like your great-great-grandkids might get home, that kind of a thing. And they needed a shorthand to get to that. And that is when, and that is why, Boom, Mike, came up with the quadrant system. And this is from, people didn't realize this at first. There's a beta and a gamma quadrant mentioned in The Price, right? And Geordi and Data get back, and those greedy Ferengi get trapped, only to be, who knew they'd get picked up on Voyager, 5, 6, 7, 8 years later. But this is the first time, again, we're looking down at the disk of the galaxy. It's still a blobular cluster in the middle. And here's the spiral arms, and we know where Earth is. So for the first time, we're going to say, okay, all those different systems knew where Earth was, but here's the scale, and here's how we're going to orient it. This is a clock face looking down at the top, quote unquote, of the Milky Way, and we're going to draw a median through the center through Earth. Like we're going to draw a diameter, just like the meridian, the Greenwich meridian is for time zones on Earth. Now, why did we draw it through Earth? The same reason that the British drew it through Greenwich. If you're the dominant culture and you're setting up the measuring system, you get to call the shots. So the same way that 0 GMT starts in the UK still, even though the world has shifted, and we just adopted that and everybody else just went along with it. And now this is what apparently the Klingons, Romulans, Cardassians, everybody else goes along with it, to the Dominion. They use alpha, beta, gamma. Now, why is it alpha, beta, gamma, delta like that and not alpha, beta, gamma, delta? So Mike to this day does not know why he just did this. But this is in the fourth, this is set up in a third season episode. So when the writers and the show came back for the fourth season and the technical manual in-house, not the writer's guide, but the technical manual for new writers and directors was updated. This is the first time in the in-house tech manual for the writers and staff and directors that the quadrants were set down. And not only that, but Mike and Rick said, okay, well, here's Earth, here's the Federation, here's the Romulans, here's the Klingons. So then your neutral zone is here, and whatever the Organians did is down here. Now, this is fourth season. There's no Cardassia, there's no Bajor. Now the Borg had been out, and you see here, this is where he said, let's put the Borg way, way, way off in the Delta. So when we're ready to do stories about them, we can. Oh, come on, Bucky. There we go. Stop being so skitsy with me. Boom. This is the first time this was all set down for that episode, and then in the weeks after, so that coming back, so now everybody on staff is on the same page. And of course, the Mike Okuda sense of humor. Here be dragons, like the old ancient maps, right? So there you go. So now here's the pretty version that was in that Jeff Mandel worked on, and this is the way it looks in the stellar cartography. So now here's the pretty version with DS9 and then later Voyager relating to how the quadrants are laid out. So you barely had this. So when they're developing DS9, they want the Dominion and they want the wormhole to be the Bajoran wormhole to be a thing. That's how they laid it out. And that's how they told the writers. That was in the original documents, the in-house stuff. When Voyager has the caretaker take them to the other side of the, and they also, at the time, and this drives people crazy, they wanted everything about DS9 to be over here in the Delta and everything about Voyager to be in Gamma and then in the Delta for Voyager, because they didn't want the two series overlapping. They wanted them to both tell their stories, and so now we get into those things about, well, why didn't Voyager just fly across and come back through? Sorry, guys. Why didn't Voyager just come back and, take the Bajoran wormhole back? It's like that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Plus, it's by the time you got across all this unexplored space, who's to say that was safer than, and then you'd be dealing with the Dominion when you got there. So anyway, but this is.
We have a question for you.
Okay.
Do you think one day that we will discover that wormholes are real?
Well, there again, and here's where, I'm not a PhD in this, but I think vaguely I can say, here we need Dr. Aaron here or Andre, but it's a theoretical construct. Some science, it's a theory, and exactly what they look like. I mean, the motion picture used them from Jesko von Puttkamer was the NASA, a person there. They kind of dramatized it a little bit. Of course, the Bajoran wormhole is not a real wormhole; it's a construct, and the Barzan wormhole is, was unstable. But there's at least one school, whether it's a widespread belief, they just don't know exactly what the dimensions are of it, or what or whether it's one chunk of scientists think they exist and others don't. But it's a thing that at least some body of people do. Now, what the properties are and what exactly is going on and what it explains, like they've invented them to try to explain some behaviors that have been measured and scanned, or if this is happening, then this must exist. The way, people have been trying to prove Einstein's laws, his theories, and trying to say, well, if this is true, then we should see this. Oh, we didn't see that. And that's how science research, they modify it or whatever. Or that's totally wrong. Or maybe part of this is true, part of it isn't, that we can see maybe we're not, that's scientific method. But yeah, it's definitely a serious thing in science, been around for decades. And, it's tempting for Hollywood to jump in like black holes. You remember, people love to make black hole a thing. It's like that, and you have real science sitting through watching movies and go, that is not how a black hole works. That's, that's the danger of living in a free world with capitalistically made movies without like a science, a science dictatorship telling everybody what they can and can't do in their storytelling. But yes, wormholes are a thing that some or all scientists believe in, and there's still much, much more to find out about them and maybe modify the theories. But yeah, yes, absolutely. Anyway, there's the pretty version. Now here's what's interesting. We now have a quadrant system, or a way of chopping up the galaxy in a way. What's interesting is, and again, this is us versus the level of Star Trek science. Star Trek, everybody, not just humans in Federation, but everybody, Klingons, Romulans, all they are all bopping. Or if you got warp drive, that's kind of why warp drive is the contact threshold. If you've got warp drive, you're out beyond your own little planet and you see things with a huge perspective, right? So as long as we're just on Earth, our constellation maps are fine. But the minute you leave Earth, suddenly no one cares what your view from your own planet of the heavens look like, because it does nobody any good. If you're 50 light years away, nothing on Earth makes sense. That's not going to do you any good for your navigation. You have to be beyond that and have other systems to catalog and to measure and all. And so the sector system and just the basics, starting with the grid, the way it's done. Now in Star Trek, with its galactic consciousness, they draw the quadrants. And the other question is, when did the quadrant system in Star Trek time? Well, in real world time, it was when it was done. But, in Star Trek 6, Sulu says we're returning from, he says the beta quadrant, but he says we're returning from cataloging gaseous anomalies in the beta quadrant. Well, so by the time of Khitomer, the quadrant system was in use. And of course, the original series in the real world, they would say quadrant, sector, and have no idea what they were talking about and mix it up back and, But by the time of Next Generation, this was all getting, and by the time of the middle of Next Generation, this is all getting settled. What's funny though is I discovered that this is the way kind of not a quadrant system, but this is the way the galaxy is divided up now. But look what's happening. Instead of having the crosshairs at the center of the galaxy, they're doing it on us, on our system, which I guess makes sense to earthbound astronomers and physicists and researchers. But it totally skews, because what's going to be the weakest? These are both going to have the bulk of the stars that come up. This side is going to have, fewer than anyone. I get why they do it, but it's just crazy. To me, I'm just like, oh, come on, grow up. Hurry up and get your galactic consciousness. Also, though, here is a barred spiral. When we say barred spiral, this is now how it's depicted. There's actually a clump, and part of that is just the motion and the effect of gravity on that scale. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. This is being skitsy. On that scale, it just clumps up that way. Now, the next one here, and they do the degrees to the counterclockwise instead of, come on, guys, move ahead. So this is a radiometric scan. I found this somewhere a couple years ago. This is actual scientists trying to make sense of the probes and the James Webb and the Hubble, and trying to put some kind of actual structure that we knew about, but trying to fine tune it a little bit. And this scientist overlaid, this is the way it came out of the scan, and he overlaid Star Trek's nomenclature over it. So all of a sudden, yeah, I know the alpha, this is like flipped upside. I would love to have flipped it over, but basically here, again, I am so sorry, guys. This is an experiment to me because I had to use hello? Where's my pop-up box? Okay, that's interesting. Hold on. I know, technically I have 15 minutes left. There we go. Where are you guys? Here. Where is my... What is happening? Just a second. Let me do this again. Let me do it here offline. Okay, boom. Boom. Okay. And then I promise you I'm going to pick it up a little bit because we'll go through things. Okay. I maybe I'm stretching my maybe I'm pushing them as hard as I they're going to blow apart, Captain. Okay. This is a real world imaging, very simplified, where they took some imaging from some of our advanced probes and scans that we can do, and radio, spectrum type stuff, and then overlaid Star Trek, except that it's backwards. So alpha and beta are at the top, but again, so we've got Earth at the top instead of here. So it's just flipped. So you could I could flip this over, but I can't. But basically, here's the Federation, Romulans and Klingons, Cardassians are here, and the Borg are over here. So we're looking at it just backwards. but he's this person, I should say he or she are trying to give us an idea of where, the Kazon are out here on the edge where the supposedly the caretaker array brought Voyager, and then the Dominion's over here in the Gamma Quadrant. But this is a real world scientist trying to have fun and trying to show, what that would look like. Now, this is a chart that Jeff Mandel did for Insurrection, or otherwise known as Star Trek 9. And it was supposed to be like it was going to fit a panel somewhere on one of the sets. I think they're in a stellar cartography Enterprise. Anyway, this is before, this is still with the quadrants here, but it's very, very close in. And it's meant to be artsy as well as anything else, but he's trying to put overlap real world things to it. But this wasn't used. He didn't make it on camera, but it's just kind of cool. But he's just trying to fit it in. That's not the entire galaxy disk. That's a close in. Here's an example on Next Generation era when you would see them standing in front of a star chart. And if you were like me, you were dying to be able to read because you could see there was writing. And this is the fun stuff. This is Mike and the art staff doing a thing like, okay, they throw stuff up and you can't really tell, so you can't go by this. But if you look at all of these unless there's something that really is about the planet of the week that's in the script, the story, most of the time they wouldn't. This was meant to be reused. So no matter what the episode was and what the adventure, the mission was, they could reuse. Really, this is what I used to call the patronage story, but it's the in-jokes. Just the same way you get the in-jokes on the crew rosters, and the ship names or where they're going and all that. You have the West Wing crew, or you've got whatever from whatever other movie. This is a lot of the crew names are up here, right? As Planet Alpha Johnson, Theta Sepulveda, Brownfield's planet, Guy Vardaman's planet. So this is an example of, but it's the old pre-computer paste up. There's even the gap in the paper there where they're gluing it down and then shooting a negative and doing the gels. So when you'd see those on the Next Generation, those were what that was. Now, here they've turned Jeff Mandel loose. By the time we have astrometrics on Voyager, and they're putting up actual images from the Hubble on some of those side panels, and they would show that this is Jeff actually nailing this down, because by now Jeff has got a contract to do the first book, the Star Maps book that had the foldouts in the back. And he's prepping on things. It's the end of Voyager, and especially the beginning of Enterprise, because what's Enterprise doing? It's a little Warp 5 engine, and they're doing their first baby steps out from Earth. So everywhere they're going is very close in. You can't throw in 82 different fictional stars that sound cool. You're going to be dealing with the real stars. And if there's an alien name for it, there's only so many stars around us, whether they have life or not, or they're just, they have no planets or whatever. So he was already looking down the line to doing that. But meanwhile, toward the end of Voyager, I was helping with this. All the times Voyager had if you saw this on the wall, there was no way you're watching at home in the episode, there's no way you're going to see this. Now, this got published later. But at the time, just doing that on the wall, stop it. There we go. This is all the times that there were major jumps home, like when Kess gave them a leap, when all the different times something would give them a little bit of a shove home. So he's got those marked here and this is actually, again, we're upside down like that. That's real astronomer. So here's the alpha and beta here. And and instead of, going like a V, the way Mike first drew it, this is just upside down, but same thing. He's got on Voyager's astrometric screen, he's got the Bajoran wormhole going over to the Dominion space. But he's also basically got Voyager's trek home. Here would have been a straight line home back to Earth. And here's the path that they actually took that he's saying. And at the time here, this is what a lot of people didn't get. They weren't, if the boundaries here are the meridian you draw through the center, this is a line that's marked by the sol in the center. I didn't say this. Then the 90-degree angle is the cross piece. But, this is the line we're going to draw, just like you drew the line through Greenwich, England, right, to start the meridians there. Then if you're coming home, you're going to cross a chunk of the beta quadrant. What blows people's minds is, half of the year Earth is in the beta quadrant. If you're strictly saying that Sol is the boundary, then half of the year it's on the beta side, and half the year it's on the alpha side. And every other planet in the solar system's the same way. But you're going to cross a chunk of the beta quadrant, and you're going to probably cross close to the Romulans as you get home. I mean, that's just a thing. Anyway, this was up for people that said, "Oh, a lot of the Memory Alpha folks who were whole different story," but it's like this was on screen and canon, and as late as as early as the late Voyagers in this much detail. So here's the way it was in Jeff's first in the book, and this is that same idea here. Again, backwards, that same direction. Here we are. Now we're back with the Alpha and Beta down here in the Gamma, and you can see there's the Founders and the Dominion, and the Borg are up here. The Hirogen he's got over here, the Hirogen as well. The Vadwar that only should have been in more episodes that weren't. So again, these are all different. Increasingly, we're getting really, really precise about how Star Trek overlaps with the thing. Now, here's some other bits that are also in there. And this is, instead of looking at it as a plate or a clock face, here we're looking at the galaxy from the side. And this is what I mean. Here's your hump in the middle, the core of the galaxy here. And then as you get out toward the edge of the galaxy, quote unquote, it tapers off. And here's the densest part of the Milky Way here. And this is the side view, and this is through the cross section. And this is also how Jeff explained that Delta Vega in the second, Where No Man's Gone Before, right? And the energy barrier, they weren't way out here at the edge of the galaxy. The edge of the galaxy is in the skin of the plate. So Delta Vega and the Enterprise that year, Gold Shirt Uhura, not Uhura, Gold Shirt Spock, they were at the edge of the galaxy this way, not all the way out here. So that's one of those things. And this is Jeff trying to say, look, there's an energy barrier that encases the whole galaxy. Like, this is what it must look like over here. Anyway, now that's not the best science either. And Discovery just revisited that too with the 10C. So here is the basic layout from Mike's first sketch of where all the basic powers are. And then later on, we fit in the frame. So here's the crosshair. I mean, not the crosshair. This is a crosshair on Earth. So here's the overall meridian, and then the Romulans are over here, the Klingons are here, but here's Cardassia, Bajor, the Zenkethi, right? Remember them? But the Ferengis up here, and the First Federation, which is Balok's people, the Breen are up here, the Tholians are over here, and the Telosians are down here. Not the Telosians, the Talarians are here. So this is a combination of not so much real world stars, because you didn't have that much when you got to the big powers, right? The alien powers, but so much about what makes sense in a story wise. And then again, here, this is kind of what the Klingon and Romulan space. And it kind of, the Earth was consumed with the Romulans because of the Vulcan tie. And so who are our first baddies that we met? The Romulans and Klingons. And it makes sense that the Cardassians didn't come along till later because they're over that way, the opposite side. And I'm, again, treating all this like it's two-dimensional. And now here's close-ups from the book of, and here's a locator window down here of the Gamma Quadrant, and remembering where they are. With the Borg so massive, they actually peeked over a little over the boundary there. And then basically the Voyager path home now that we know. And if you're following along with Prodigy, they're not pioneering. There's lots of Delta Quadrant stuff popping up, and the ability to traverse it. And if you're way out here to get, without having something special, they're getting back, and they're either hijacking the Borg transwarps or the Hirogen, but anyway, but this is the state of what Jeff got to. So this is Jeff's slide from his slideshow, but I love it because all the things I was telling you about, this kind of finally puts in perspective. So look here, here is the original, basically the original Franz Joseph Tech Manual 1975 version of how big the Federation was, and the Klingons and Romulans to either side. And here's the whole galaxy, right? Here's what we look at now when we have the Federation here kind of in the middle, and the Klingons and Romulans over here, and the Cardassians here, and the Borg way up here, and the Dominion way over here. So this was just too big for this to be a walk in the park, a Sunday drive for the scale of warp drive, even though it's been ramped up for the next generation. Then if you go to the middle version there, this is not the whole galaxy. This is close in how they were looking at how they were dividing up and coming up with spheres and the Romulans and Klingons in the original. This area here is more like about this area here. And then this is the galaxy. I'm sorry, this is like local space. So this circle here is if you basically drew a circle here. So here's your beta quadrant side and the alpha quadrant side, and we're not up to the meridian to the gamma and delta. So just so you there again, and here's the scale. The galaxy being 100,000 light years across. This is only 1,000. So this is really a small dab here, which is kind of crazy. That's almost like too small. And then get over here. This is the same size circle. So this is more in scale of what all the basic ability of warp drive to propel us across. And even though we all know how they, like in the chase, they're bopping around. I don't care if they are, doing warp 9. They're running around all over the known galaxy in the chase, collecting the clues. And then this is here's Voyager's path home, basically. So I'm at an hour, and I'm really sorry. I've got a little bit more things. Can we go on just maybe 15 more minutes? Is everybody okay with that? Okay, okay. And I apologize for taking so long to begin. Let me get through this. This is, and then I promise we'll do questions for whoever wants to stay and finish up. This is Jeff. These are actual props that were on set on the NX-01 in Archer's time. This looks like it's a page out of his book he did in 2002. But this is an example of Jeff using the real stars that are close to Earth, because Enterprise is they're not bopping around the galaxy, pushing the different quadrants. They don't even have a beta and an alpha. I don't think they ever used the quadrant term. There may have been one time when they did, and I was like, oh, guys, you didn't mean to do that. But here's your beta alpha quadrant boundary as we would come to know it, because here's Earth. And see here, there's a range that's based off of Earth. So now you've got, I forget what the scale is here. I think if it's a sector is 20 light years. So this may be 5 light years, 10, 15, 20. But here's a case of he's charted all the known stars that we know with their name that we know them. And there's different cataloging namings. And then if there was a proper name that one of the ancient, mainly the Arabs, did a lot of star watching. The Arabs had a great astronomical research in the ancient times. And a lot of these names are all Arabic names that we use because if it had a, like Rigel, like Vega, like Altair, almost all of those are Arabic. Some are Greek, but almost all of them are Arabic. And now, the other thing, the famous that we, from Alpha Centauri, all the way up to whatever, to, you have Alpha, Beta, Gamma, something. The second word is an Earth constellation. And all that is in the early days, like the Middle Ages, when we had constellations, people are looking at the sky on Earth and saying, well, that looks like a bear, Ursa Major. That looks like an eagle, Aquila or Aquila. It was a grouping of stars. Well, they would just say, the Arabs would give the brightest ones they could see by eye a name. And that's why we have double names of real stars. But there was a German, his last name was Bayer, like Bayer aspirin, only Bayer, and we call it the Bayer system. He basically said, whatever your clump in a constellation is, the brightest star is Alpha, the next brightest is Beta, the third brightest is Gamma, which is a cool system, except for if you ever want to get off Earth, that constellation is only the way it looks. That's just a group of stars visually here. You get out into the real galaxy, they may be hundreds of light years apart. And the bright one might be bright just because it's close to you. And the dim one of that bunch may be bigger than the original one, but it's just further away. So they're cool for us to star watch with. And we name them and we are studying them. And eventually that gets attached. But when you're out flying around the real stars, they're kind of in the same direction from Earth. But other than that, there's no real relevance. So, but that's the thing. That's what all the Alpha, Beta, Gamma do. What's funny is when Star Trek comes up with something and it's an alpha this, and the second word is not an Earth constellation, it's just some word they made up because it sounds cool, but it has an alpha or a beta in front of it or a gamma. So it sounds like a star. So yay, there's my star. So I inherited the project. He did the book. Jeff did the book. 10 years go by. They wanted to revisit that, there were so many people who were scanning the foldouts and then, photo merging them together and then trying to print them out. Gamers, much less just, star nerds, especially. And so they came up with the idea to do the posters, and we did, and there's historical angles to them and all that. But the basic alpha and beta quadrants, and then again, Jeff's kitchen sink map. And then I had to update it. And then there were a ton of stars that Jeff somehow left out, going back to the original series. So we've been still backfilling a lot of original series era stars that weren't in the earlier editions. But here's an example. If you look at the pages in his book, and if you find it on our maps, this is the real, here's your "Oh Be a Fine Girl, Kiss Me." This is the real science temperature range and the basic color of the star, the way it appears on Earth. And you'll notice the cooler ones are lower temperature. Wait, well, that makes no sense. Oh, wait, 28 to 50,000. This is degrees Kelvin, right? Where it's absolute zero. I'm sorry, centigrade, the science thing. Okay, the temperatures range, it's not a progression. So but F, G, K, and M are the stars that the temperature range and the age, because that's what color and temperature it is. That's the age. It's old enough to have had an evolved planetary system and cool enough to be in the right, they call it the Goldilocks zone. It's just right to have, in Star Trek terms, we'd say Class M worlds. So supposedly, if we're running around with bumpy-headed bipedals that we're talking with on a universal translator, those are all going to be, Class M planets. Those stars should all be F, G, K, and M. And if there's famous ones that didn't, like say Rigel, people like Jeff over the years and me a little bit have retconned excuses for that. What's cool is with the comeback of the shows now, you saw this, right? This is the Ready Room, especially the first season of Discovery, for anybody watching Discovery. It was thrilling because after that big gap, as opposed to the JJ movies where they didn't want anybody working on Star Trek ahead of time to be working with them. They wanted a fresh start. Well, coming in to do Discovery, there was a big push from the studio, which we'd had 12 years of we'd had the JJ movies, but not weekly stories again. And that's where the weekly shows are where you get all the canon cool stuff, right? The planets and the cultures and costumes and props and star charts and star usage. And there was John Van Sitters, my friend in licensing, made a big push, sent the graphics and the art departments a ton of the best of the behind the scenes books, and sent them a copy of Jeff's book and our stellar cartography. And so lo and behold, you're in Lorca's Ready Room, the first season of Discovery, and I saw this and I about peed my pants, because if you do the nitty gritty and compare, here's our graphics and Jeff's graphics, and then here's the way it looked on his wall. So they're picking up every little detail, putting it in their graphic style, and doing it. So I was like really, really pleased. That was very cool. And since then, with a hiccup here and there, and here's another look at that. Here's the boundary, the Klingon bound. Now, what they did in his room was there's no mention of Romulans at all. It's like, don't complicate this. I was funny because there's like no Romulan neutral zone up here at all. But you can see the basic border and where everything is, and this is blurry, but when you can get up and read them close, like that last one I showed you. So that was very cool. That was very cool. Now, one thing I got to do was Jeff's book went through late Voyager. So one thing I got to do was both update the end of Voyager, but I'm sorry, he went through the first year of Enterprise. I got to update for Enterprise, and also by the historical thing, I basically made a sense of the Dominion War, which is a whole sidebar. But just to show you what happened, the clues we had from The Expanse, right? Third season. There's one point where they're 50 light years from Earth and they enter the Expanse, right? In the thermobaric cloud barrier. And then there's another point where they've been in for several episodes. And they get a message out somehow and they figure out that they're 50 light years from Earth. And I'm like, well, if they came in 50 light years away and now have they been going in circles or what's going on? That, and also trying to figure out where the Expanse fit in. And even though it went away, the stars they were visiting didn't go away. They're just going to be deposited there amongst, normal space now. basically I came up with the idea that the Expanse, instead of being another area like you're looking at it like the plate, the Expanse was like a big lasagna noodle that kind of dropped through the thin part of the looking at it through the thin. And that's how they were able to go. This is like the galactic plane here. They're able to go in at 50 light years away, and they're basically going down, if you can say that. So they're going down and curving around before they get down to the old Zindi planet. Anyway, and that's how they're still 50 light years away. But that's a case where the writers are doing this and no one's keeping track really. And then later on, whether it's ships, whether it's cultural stuff, whether it's timeline, we're sitting around going, okay, here's how we'll make it work. Here's how we'll make it work. The Expanse was said to be 2,000 light years long, which was never going to fit if we just stuck with the plain old, the usual old, it's on a lateral dimension. But having it be like a wet lasagna noodle, I keep saying, and going up and down wise, that was easy to do. So when you look at it from above, it looks like a thin, it's like looking at the top of the lasagna noodle looking down. And that's what this, anyway, this was my original sketch when I was figuring that out to show people. And then we did two versions, the 2013 first one, and then we had all the rest of Discovery's first year to do that first year. And that's when we cut it off. And all the other shows were coming out so slowly. Nothing has been updated since then publicly. But what's cool is, see the red? That's everything I added just for the first season of Discovery. A couple of things, we were still backfilling all the star bases that hadn't been included from the original series and Next Gen and all of that. We were trying to get all the star bases located. Look how smart I've gotten at this now. But anyway, that's just an example there of how much updating I got to do. To the point where now, remember when they were chasing Spock and Spock's known last location on Discovery, and they would flash this on a console and it would sit there for a few seconds? I was like, wait a minute. And you couldn't read some of the writing you could kind of read, but I started looking at things that you could see, and I basically overlaid. They basically took the charts and put it in their graphic style, but it was instantly, I was like, oh. And I was like, wait a minute, they're chasing Spock into the Klingon Empire? Because that's what this is. So it's like, was that a story point? I don't think it was a story point. But it was like, oh, hey, everybody, they whether nobody was paying attention to the graphic artists or not, they're chasing Spock into the Klingon Empire to find him, when that was part of the big story point. Anyway, this is just, I don't know why I have this here. It's just a close-up of some of the things we're doing. Then third season, when they jumped into the 32nd century, they had a very cool thing they were trying to do and make a 3D representation. They used it in camera a lot. It was kind of confusing to people that weren't keeping up with it. But at the time when they're in the future, and they even have the emerald chain. This was on one panel. This is a fan did this, set this up. I didn't do this whole bit, but they were trying to track where the new floaty Federation / Starfleet headquarters was, since it wasn't at Earth, and what was Emerald Chain, and what was the core of the Federation now. And here's Cardassia. Anyway, they took this. Here's Ferengi, Cardassia, and obviously the Andorians and Orions are the main worlds in the Emerald Chain. But basically took it and said, okay, here it is. So the new Federation headquarters was over here. See, they did all this where they tracked it over, because they had, again, taken our chart and done that, which is very cool. And it's a great blow for continuity, as long as somebody didn't get too smart for their britches, But again, I knew that Picard was going to be just fine. I'm throwing this in because some of you may have seen this fly by. Michael Chabon, when we were all hoping for crumbs from Picard, and they posted this, and I was like, it's in good hands, because Kirsten Beyer, who was very grounded with her canon as she wrote Voyager books and other things, she did basically, this was their whiteboard, and he took a picture of it and posted it, because it doesn't give anything away. But I was like, they did exactly what I would have done. If I'm saying, how is Star Trek laid out? You can see this. I would have, you can't see me, maybe you can. I would have gone, here's the quadrants. Here's Federation, here's Federation, here's the Klingons, here's Romulans over here, Romulans with the neutral zone, a little out of scale, Borg are up here, Dominions over here, Cardassian Bajors over here. Like, you go ding, 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 ding. There's your basic Star Trek layout. And when I saw them, and that's the level that their initial little think tank was doing, I was like, oh, it's going to be in good hands. They've got a good grounding of I don't know why I did that. They got a good grounding of what's of place. And then third season of Picard that everybody loves so much, they're bopping the whole. Did you know the events of the third season of Picard take place in 1 week?
Wow.
The first show when Riker and Picard are in the bar, and he says, "Yeah, I've got to be at this thing in a week and give a speech," and I was like, "Oh my god, a week!" So 10 episodes, those 10 episodes fit into 7 days. But what was cool was, the fucking hubris, excuse me, in Clancy's office from the first season. I was watching and I went, "What is this over here? That's kind of green and red, and that almost looks like the Federation." And a new graphic artist, all on his own, had come up with his version of the basic layout, and everything's there. It's kind of it's not exactly the most accurate way. I don't think his squares are actual sectors, the 20 light year sector, which a lot of the graphics people don't seem to get a hold of until Mike or Jeff get a hold of them, or I do. But anyway, this is the map that they used on Picard that first season in her office. And we've been updating it for what's been going on. This is kind of this is Jeff doing this on his own, the back end of, the Romulans are here, the Klingons are here, and this is kind of the back end. But this is cool. This is just this is a little bit of updating, showing the extent of the Romulan supernova. This is what Jeff has done on his own, and the next time we update this, God willing, that we get to do it, that I get to do it. This is kind of the extent of the supernova shockwave when they finally finished retconning it from 3 different directions. And then what was very cool was, as Picard season 3 started off, and they went to go hunt. Beverly. Come on. This is some Jeff worked. They had the golden age. Mike and Denise Okuda and Doug Drexler and on down. Doug was in there too working, and Jeff, and he contributed this star chart. It's on a graphic board in the Helios 12. So the Crusher's little medical ship had some star charts up. And the very first thing that happens is the hunt starts. Picard, Riker head for the Righton system, right? And Shaw won't take them there, and the whole no and all that scene. Well, this was lore oriented. So here's the top of the Romulan neutral zone. Here's Romulus. Earth is down here. And the Righton system was, when they said it was on the border of Federation space, come on, guys. It literally was just outside Federation space. So there you go. But it was cool to see once again that the current shows, Strange New Worlds, I don't have anything here, but they're really using that layout too. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that the roots of real science have been with Star Trek from the beginning, although it was a little loosey-goosey as far as, locations versus story points versus, you say this warp engine will do this. What does that look like in the, and how easy is it to bop from Earth over to DS9 and back? Does that really, and the Dominion War and the war fronts and all of that, sometimes there's still a little bit of stretch that has to be done. But it's amazing to me. This is one of the things, again, that sets Star Trek aside. And I know people have, Jeff worked a lot on the Firefly series and charted for that and everything. And I know people do it for Star Wars too, but those don't hold the candles the way that Star Trek has managed to come along. And even with those earlier passion projects that people tried to do, by the time of Next Gen and Mike working on the quadrants, and we've had a stable system that we've added to and tried to adhere to. So, and it's surprising. And when you have a big gap going into all the Kurtzman era, that could have been lost, but it hasn't. Don't ask me about the the case of the JJ movies. That was a little bit, I think we can still finesse those, as they didn't seem to care too much about place. They were just, the adventure. The Beyond was the one that did the most with where are you and how far away are things. But yeah, that's I was really thrilled to see Discovery and Strange New World and Picard and the animateds, especially Prodigy. Prodigy is very keen on. Lower Decks did a couple of oopsies, But we've already smoothed that over. When the Beta Z women were talking about where they were going on the neutral zone, and it didn't make logic sense, but we'll handle that. So there you go, guys. I don't know if that was, hopefully that was something new and interesting and you didn't have an idea. And again, you can see how, as much as we can. In fact, I'm sitting here waiting for the real science world to adopt Star Trek's planet class system. Like the stellar system existed and we used it, but it's like every once in a while I'll talk to a scientist and say, come on, you've got to have like Earth, Mars, normal planets be class M. You have to. The rest of the world will rise up and take over science if you don't do if you don't do that. But yeah, so there you go. Hopefully I surprised you. Hopefully you learned something that you didn't know or didn't realize, the timeline of all of us poor schmucks trying to make this work. We weren't writing Spock stories. We were trying to make the planet systems fit. Hello? Are we good?
Yeah, you're good. Sorry, I was muted. I was saying
Oh,
that that just was amazing, amazing presentation. And what amazes me is your devotion and dedication for so long, and just witnessing through your pictures that you shared your evolution in this process and how it just sprouted. It's just fantastic.
it's one of those goof.
Fantastic.
It's amazing how much time when you're like a junior and senior in high school and you're stuck out in the country. And before the internet, in a 3 network, 4 network, 4 channel world, you had all kinds of time to kill, and that's where mine went. So, but it's part of the personal thing there is work, work, work. And then Letraset days when like the big, I said, was the backside of a calendar from my dad's office that was the white. Like those were all like the old Letraset days. Those were like hand lettered, like the rub off letters,
Yes.
those days. So and then that's why it was as heartbreaking on the amount of research time I put in as much as it was just the press on letter. When the new thing came along and Jeff is like, well, it's a whole new deal. Everything we worked on is gone. Some of my systems were still going to be doable and they put them in, but I didn't have any credit. I was like, oh well. I know. But he did. There is a Nemechek star in the Star Trek charts, the black ones that are in the pouch.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was this, and I was like, I hated it. I called him. He said, because you'd look and there'd be like Disney Star, and there'd be empty spaces on those charts, and he'd have like a THX 1138 over here. He'd have a C57D, or he'd have a Pal's World or Disney Star, and I'm like, don't do that. Today we would say that's not canon. Like I would, but my panties in a wad over that. I'm like, you've got these patronage stars, and you're doing them to fill up space just to make people feel good. That wasn't on the show. You didn't have the phrase "it's not canon" then, but anyway. And one of them was for me, and I'm like, okay, fine, but that shouldn't be there, even though it's hilarious. So all my friends, when all this blew up, we'd be at a con, and my good friends, we'd be sitting at a dealer's table that had these, and it's like some kids would be sitting there, and one of my friends would go, "Hey, kids, have him show you his star." I'm like, hey, kids, have him show you his star on that chart. Hey, my friend has a star name for him. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Like, I don't even want to admit that it exists. Anyway, but my original business name was My Star Media and My Star Press. Like, okay, that's my star. Ha ha. So much for having everything I worked on in the beginning wiped away. But that's your perspective when you're a kid in college versus you get out in the world, and then the world, about the time you get down, then things come back around and they start a new show and you get in and things happen. And then lo and behold, one day you're there working. And when Generations was first coming together, the first year of DS9, and they were setting up the art department for the first TNG movie. And I was up getting stuff, collecting stuff, and Mike Okuda goes, "Larry, there's someone I want you to meet." And I go over, and he goes, "Larry, this is Jeff Mandel. Jeff, this is Larry." And it was like 15 years later, and we wrote back and forth and sweated through this, and it blew up, and he never sent me the copies. He was, all this stuff. And it was just like one of those, oh my God, it's like, here we've met at Paramount on the lot in the art department when long distance calling. We didn't even talk on the phone because we couldn't afford long distance, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's just weird how. And then he's and then a couple years later, he's got the contract to do the book, and he goes, Larry, you want to work on star charts again? And I'm like, okay, sure. 20 years later, sure. And
Wow.
then, you know, then 10 years later, they do the stellar cartography charts. So anyway,
Wow.
it's yeah, it's funky. I really do need to write. I mean, I've said this on a lot of interviews and podcasts and things, but I really should write this down sometime.
Definitely, definitely should. Well, I wanted to open it up if there's any questions that you folks would have for Larry while we have him.
I'm looking at everybody. So somebody was talking about what a barred spiral was, which was probably far more technical and accurate than what I was trying to say. But thanks you guys for being here and being interested. It's again, it's like I used to think there was whatever it was that was my interest in Star Trek. It was like me and 8 other people pre-internet. So now I think maybe it's me and 80 other people or something. But anyway,
Well,
um,
we are really happy that you took the time, especially on your birthday, to join us. And this talk has been so fascinating. I can't wait to pull my book out and look at those maps again. Having this background
mhm.
behind me, I think they're going to be fantastic.
Well, cool. I knew that when we did the big maps, the stellar cartography maps, I said, well, I know one thing, like gamers are gonna love these. I can see tons of people getting them, putting them under plastic, and you
Mhm.
know, and having ship whatever whatever they're doing or making up their own thing or whatever they're doing.
Mhm.
And that they've been real popular. People are disappointed they can't like buy their own, like they can't buy them individually. They have
Mhm.
to buy the box, but they've gotten to, hopefully we get a chance to update that because now there's been this huge, the first update was just that 1 year of discovery and we backfilled some things that had been overlooked. Now they've gone bonkers, you know, because I mean, I'm trying to, and I've been in touch with the graphic guy. His name's Tim Peel, and he's been trying to keep a catalog kind of database he's kind of trying to be the Mike Okuda of the current era to keep up with systems and also kind of be a voice for, okay, writers, when you're kind of like oozing around with your concept, where are we? How, you
Mhm.
know, like how long does it take to get to the next place? You can't just bop from Romulus to Cardassia in a day, you know, kind of a thing. Or you can't get to the Borg frontier from Chronos in 6 hours. You know, that's unless something wacky's happening, you found a wormhole or something. So he's fighting the good fight, almost like he's not getting paid for that. But since he's doing the graphics for things, he's anyway, it's been funny. But he reached out to me and said, "How do these look?" And you know, so we're kind of working together to kind of keep things,
Yeah.
you know, together, or me explain something to him.
Nice.
Because he's a he's a graphics guy, not a scientist.
Mhm.
But and neither am I, but
Mhm.
you can still wrap your head around it
Oh
and
yeah.
you
It
know.
looks like Randy Mitson has a question for you.
Do. So all the graphics that you used tonight, I've discovered your YouTube channel. I'm
Uh-oh.
now subscribed.
Oh, good. Thank
Um,
you.
is that presentation that you used tonight available online anywhere?
Uh it is kind of. So one time Roddenberry had worked with a company, and I've gone blank on the name of it, but the whole thing was they were trying to make a virtual, like a Second City type thing. Not Second City, Second Life. They were trying to make virtual avatars in a virtual space. Um, and for a while we were doing presentations, and I did one with the VR helmet on at the offices. But I basically went through that. It was a slightly smaller version of that. I didn't have some of Jeff's slides then, but it was so weird. I gave it virtually, and all the people who were attending were there virtually with their avatars, except the room could only hold like 40 avatars, and then beyond that, people had to watch from a different room and not really be there physically, which is weird. Anyway, after it was done, I said, wait, did anybody record that? And they're like, oh, no. Like, it's kind of hard to record the virtual. I'm like, are you kidding me? And then apparently, before I knew much about Twitch, somebody on Twitch stumbled into the thing and recorded it on Twitch. So I don't have it at my fingertips, but I can send it to Barb and she can share it with you, and we can put it in posted thing. So there's a virtual thing of me as a virtual character in front of this Starfleet-y kind of big room with all kinds of weird, wacky people populating. Look like 40 different transporter accidents or something. And I'm at this thing, but I talk, and the things I showed you are up on the big virtual screen. It's wacky. But
Cool.
that's recorded. So and there was probably a little more information tonight than that was 3 or 4 years ago, probably. But yes, that's the only
Yeah.
record. So Barb, you're doing such a public service here by recording this and posting.
Well, this is like one of my favorite topics, and I have learned a tremendous amount, and I think everybody here has, and I know we're so appreciative of you taking the time to talk to us. And one last chance, if anybody else has any questions for Larry, you can put it in the chat box or raise your hand if you want.
Yeah, I'm scrolling down the last of the chats here, the chat things.
Barb, can I just add? I really appreciate you doing this event tonight. And Larry, thank you very, very much for presenting. It was really interesting. I was sitting at the end of my seat listening to you the whole way. Knowing that like what you started from just the Wild West, like there was no organization, nothing was buttoned down. And I mean, to take on that task, which is just like, where do you even start? But having you explain the whole process and everything, that was great.
How do any of us wind up in this, and how do any of us like figure out what really, there's always some part of Star Trek that we enjoy more than another. Whether you're shipping and you're writing fan fiction, or you're building ships, or you're doing visual effects, or you're building props, or what you're cosplaying, whatever it is, everybody gravitates to something. And part of mine was just the background and the world building and all of that. But that's, for some reason, I just remember going through Bjo's Concordance the first time I had it and going, oh my God, there's so many stars here. They're not organized. They're just all over the place. There's real ones in there. There ought to be some tent poles here we can like go to and then figure out the stories and the story facts. And anyway.
I think it's cool how we kind of stumble into things. I spent 7 years. I stumbled into a relationship with the company that now runs the largest radio telescope in Canada, Thoth Industries. And I spent 7 years doing tours there while they were rebuilding it, basically, because it's been decommissioned. But I mean, just, hearing from you and hearing from other scientists and people that just want to embrace this and make it better is just amazing. Thank you very, very much.
Well, it's my passion thing, and a couple of times I thought I was actually get paid for it, and to part of it's growing up too, because I was in college and that first thing was going to happen and be exciting, and then it all fell apart, and I was like, oh. And then Next Generation came around, and then that's when I said, okay, I want to do what Bjo did, only do it my way, and do my own concordance for the Next Gen. And I did that yearly as a fanzine at the same time that laser printing and desktop publishing and Macs were out. And then after 4 or 5 years, after a couple of years, the writers were using them at the Hart Building. And then I thought, this would be cool if I could sell it professionally and do that. And then Mike and Denise were going to do that. So they asked me to do the making of book. And they're like, you've got it written. I'm like, no, it's a whole pivot, but okay, sure. Like, I have the trivia, but I don't have what the writers and directors and creatives did, which they didn't, you've got it written already, don't you? No. And you have all these great ones that came before. If you're not going to be up to that level, then it's like, they're just slapping Star Trek on and trying to get us to buy this crap. So it's like, anyway.
Yeah.
But
looks like Redis has his hand up. Redis, do you have a question?
Yes. Hold on. I'm going to switch it off. Mr. Nemechek, my name is Redis Thomas. And I am part of soon to be the Marine Corps for the USS Tecumseh, we're Region 13. I am also the founder of a neurodiversity cosplay group called Michigan Cosabilities. I found out something about you that a lot of the people on here don't know. You were part of two conventions in your home state of Oklahoma. One is SoonerCon and the
Mhm.
other was ThunderCon. What was it like working for two conventions that was science fiction?
Well, SoonerCon, when I got out of grad school, I wanted to go back and start a convention, and this is the 80s, late 80s. And my old friends that we were reuniting were looking around for facilities and what we could do and what we wanted to do. And then we stumbled in and found out that the old Oklahoma City Starbase OKC, which was the old science fiction Star Trek club that had been there that I knew about on the other end of my college from when I was in high school, they were looking to start one. So I just threw in with them, and I was the first PR person. I did publicity for the first one because that, journalism and all that. And then it grew, but there was a lot of, I sometimes I use this term, the old school lit cons. I say lit cons, the old school sci-fi cons, that were all about authors and artists and costuming and all that. But they were really anti-media. They used to talk about media cons because there used to be this snobbery about lit science fiction and media science fiction and all that. And it was Star Trek, but also anything on screen. And this is like the 80s. And we had resistance about that. And basically, I was getting a pipeline where we could have people, even if it was just authors, and nobody. So, long story short, I loved the people doing it, and I kept my hand in. I would do publicity and all that kind of thing, but I never cared about running them. But I turned around and started my own con that would be a media con that we could take advantage of, especially after I sold the book and I was in LA and meeting people at Paramount. And that was ThunderCon. And for the Thunderbirds, 45th Division of Oklahoma, and the Thunder of before the Thunder were an NBA team. I'm talking 91. So this is like 10 years before that. And for 8 years, we had ThunderCon, which was the Star Trek convention, and we had tons of people, and it grew, and then everybody moved out, and it felt. So it wasn't like I was working on two at the same time. One, I helped out in the beginning, and then within a couple of years, felt the need to start my own, and we did that. And then we moved to LA, and it went on for a few years, and then most of the people involved, moved off. And then SoonerCon went down, and it recently came back to life about 15 years ago, and it's booming and doing great and is very diverse and embracing, and it's awesome. And they have me come every year. So I don't know if I actually answered your question, but we were just in the back home. We were just it was just an uphill fight to get attention and respect and publicity. And now, now the geeks have won, mainly because there's so much money involved with like Comic-Cons and everything sci-fi and everything fantasy and genre. And every chamber of commerce now is running around trying to duplicate, San Diego or something. So now people are courted to change, to city hop, and it's amazing. But it
did answer my question perfectly. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Larry.
Good deal. Thanks for asking too.
All right. Anybody else? Looks like SoonerCon is still going strong. Yolanda reports.
It is. It's growing every year. They're up to about 3,000 now, I think. Something like that. Growing every year.
Wow, that's an amazing
very cool.
photo in the chat box, Randy.
This is the one that you work for or work with?
Yeah, this is the Algonquin Radio Telescope in Algonquin Park in Ontario, which is Canada's largest radio dish. It's 150 feet across, 46 meters for it. It's got a sister one in Australia.
Okay.
That's with that's multiple images with the Milky Way in there also.
I was gonna say there's something artsy or something cool going on.
Yeah, it's multiple images with the stars streaking, but then the Milky Way's over top of it too.
Very good. One of my favorite movies is The Dish. The sheep paddock in Australia and getting the pictures back from Apollo 11. It's just an awesome. They just adapted the real life story to that, but I smile of anybody that's working with radio telescopes. And the one in Arecibo, the one that collapsed, they lost the rigging, and was a tragedy. It'd been there so long. But anyway. Well, good. Well, if that's it, we should call it a night probably. But
That's it.
thanks everybody for turning up and
Thank you, Larry, and happy birthday.
oh, you're welcome. See, I almost said it again. I almost said you're welcome. What am I thinking?
We'll be in
Anyway.
touch.
Birthday.
Thank you all. And thanks for asking me. I mean, I've given this presentation, a couple of times at cons, so I had the material handy, but it's always good to try to keep it updated. Again, the modern shows are really on the ball. So that's a cool thing. When they don't get ahead of themselves. A couple of times I had to say, oh, on something.
We'll
But
look forward to the new edition. I
Yeah,
hope it
hopefully.
comes out. It'd be great. I
It'd
just
be-
want to remind people that our next Sol Speakers series, which will be perfect on the timing because the speaker is here at Michigan State University. John French is going to be talking about astronomical highlights for 2024 and beyond. And he's going to give a tour of celestial events, including the solar eclipse. And then he's going to talk about how he creates Michigan State University Abrams Planetarium's award-winning sky calendar, which is an amazing sky calendar that you can subscribe to if you go to their website. So that'll be coming up next month, the third Thursday of the month. And again, Larry, thank you so much. Thanks for everyone joining us tonight. I appreciate your patience in waiting it out. And
I meant to do something and I didn't. Can I just throw everybody my contacts and stuff
Yes,
up here real
yes.
fast? I
Oh,
had it
wonderful.
here and I shut down and I totally hello. Don't do this now, right here at the end where I'm trying to. There we go. Boom. Okay. This is it's going to help if I would share, wouldn't it? Where's Zoom? There we go. Sorry guys, trying to wrap this up and here I am. And it bumped ahead. This is my family of things that you can get to through LarryNemecek.com aside from everything else. And again, if you're a background fan, Portal 47 is the ultimate backstage thing. But here's all of my socials and contact and everything. That QR code just takes you to my homepage. But YouTube, if everybody would subscribe, that would be great. I didn't make a big deal out of YouTube until the last couple of years, so I'm a little behind. But there you go. Yeah. Okay. So thanks
Larry.
again. Yeah. Thank you.
Have a good rest of the winter.
You all too. Yeah,
All
everybody.
right.
Trek
So long,
well, everybody.
Yes, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Once again, thank you very much, Barb.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.